Welcome in. It is the Northside Baseball Podcast. I am Mitch Widmeyer. He is Jason Ross, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. However you tune in, maybe it's via our website at Northside Baseball, could be our YouTube channel, could be via Apple Podcasts. However you get it, we always appreciate you clicking the play button and following along. Topics to the right of the screen, as always, for those watching via a video feed. Jason is always appreciative of your time. Cubs rocking and rolling right now. We, as always, or typically, I guess I should say, are recording on a Tuesday for a Wednesday publish. Cubs lost game one of the series to St. Louis on Monday night. Ben Brown roughed up. Cardinals not really known as a team that, uses the long ball at their disposal too much. And they hit plenty of home runs on Monday against Chicago. Cubs will try to get one back on Tuesday night. Of course, by the time you watch or listen to this, that game will have already come and gone. So a 4-game set with the Cardinals as the Cubs kind of dip their toes into the waters of playing more NL Central teams as the schedule carries along in June. We're going to start today, Jason, talking Ian Happ. And this kind of dawned on me during the series over the weekend against Seattle. Happ had a 2-homer game. The winds were howling at Wrigley Field all weekend long. You saw the big dumper, Cal Raleigh. He was hitting home
Yeah.
runs left and right.
Yeah,
A
he
lot
doesn't
of
need any. He
yeah.
doesn't need any help.
A lot of players getting in on the action when it came to the long ball in that series between the Mariners and the Cubs, and particularly with Ian Happ. Sort of a shame on me thing. It kind of took a 2-homer game for him for me to be like, damn, he is underappreciated. And it's kind of at times, because it's kind of weird that, a guy who sits at the top of the order doesn't get maybe a little more recognition because it's a lineup that has, say, a Suzuki, Kyle Tucker, Pete Crow Armstrong, and the list goes on and on. And after that 2-homer game Happ had against Seattle, I was like, man, we can't take this dude for granted. And I started just looking at his numbers. And if you talk about like the model of consistency
Mm-hmm.
in a career for a player, Ian Happ's numbers, like year over year, Jason, you literally know exactly what you're going to get with him every year. You're going to get, gold glove caliber playing left. And at the plate, you're going to get someone that's going to slash right around 250, 340, 450. He's been that guy almost every year in Chicago. 115 OPS plus for his career, WRC plus of 116 this year, career at 117. That would, suggest he's an above average guy at the plate. And I just think Ian Happ's one of those. He's a glue guy. He's a guy that he's been an all-star. He's got a gold glove to his name. And you appreciate all the accolades that come with it. But with this lineup this year, it's easy at times to forget, like, damn, we got Ian Happ at the top of the order. And I think I took more appreciation for it after that series against Seattle.
Yeah, he's I was just looking, you were talking about kind of the how consistent he is. This year, his expected WOBA, so his expected weighted on base is 343. His career is a 341. So I mean, he's super consistent. He just kind of does his thing. It's easy to forget him this year. But I think even in years past, like 2022 and 2023, maybe when the lineup wasn't as maybe kind of complete, he still kind of flew under the radar as just a really good hitter. Since 2022, I kind of use that as a good number. It's really when he changed his game offensively, started striking out less, hitting the ball and play a little bit more. He's been a top 50 player in baseball, according to FWAR. He's had more FWAR than Correa, Real Muto, Pete Alonso, Brian Buxton, Tatis, and Bichette over that time. Which is just awesome. And I know like Tatis missed a bunch of time because he's been injured and a steroid thing that was kind of going with that. So maybe that number is a little skewed, but he's been a very good baseball player. We just kind of ignore how good of a baseball player he is. I think it kind of is easy to forget him as well with his draft position. He's kind of like the forgotten top 10 pick. We think a lot about Kyle Schwarber and Albert Almora, maybe for negative things, Chris Bryant for all the things he did, Javier Baez. But we never really talk about Ian Happ being a top 9 pick. He's already got 19 career FWAR. He's probably going to finish somewhere around the 30 range, which is going to be short of Hall of Fame numbers, but in that like very good career area. He's just a very good player. Easy to forget him. And yeah, sometimes when he hits those couple home runs, It seems like every year he has about 1 month where he just really carries the offense. And I can't remember if I said that in maybe a podcast a couple weeks ago, but he started hitting, I think, right after that, and he just does that. He just does that where every once in a while, you look at his numbers kind of early in the season, you go, man, is this the year that like Ian Happ just doesn't do it? And then, a week later he hits 6 home runs. You look at his season numbers and you go, oh no, they're identical to what they were last year. Ian Happ's here and he's just going to do Ian Happ things. So yeah, I like that you brought him up today as somebody to talk about because he's just been super consistent. He plays a good left field. I think, at times maybe the Gold Gloves make him seem better than maybe he is out there. I think he's more of like he gets a lot of like value through his arm and everything like that. I think he's super rangy. But left field is also not a position where there's lots of great fielders anyways. Usually that's where you're going to put your worst fielder in the outfield as is. So the bar to being a good left fielder is a lot lower as well. So I think maybe a little bit of that gets like on both ends. Like we overrate him because of the Gold Gloves, but we underrate him because we forget about, maybe how rough left field is like league wide at the position. But he's a great player. So I'm glad you brought him up because I know I underestimated him early in his career. I don't think I realized how good he's been. And I should have probably for a while. So I think more people need to kind of celebrate the career he's had with the Cubs. I think he just like overtake Chris Bryant in like home runs and everything like that too.
Yeah. Longevity.
So,
was his ninth year with the Cubs?
Yeah, he's been around forever. He's had a really, really good career. Going back to draft day, he was never like a super sexy draft pick. The Cubs were, I don't know if you remember this, but I do. Going into that draft, it sounded like the Cubs really wanted Andrew Benintendi out of that pick. And he went right before them to the Red Sox. And all he's done is have a better career than Andrew Benintendi. Benintendi's had 10 wins of career, and Ian Happ's got 19 F4. Yeah. So he's been twice the player. It's really worked out. He's been a really nice find there. Not super sexy on the like overall, but just a really consistent player.
How much do you think it factors in how easy it is to overlook him this year because of the outfield that has PCA who's playing at an MVP level, Kyle Tucker who was the brand new toy, you brought up that word sexy, like he was the trade acquisition and it was like that addition to the lineup for the Cubs. And I when I was thinking about this after his 2-homer game, and I was like I just said earlier, it was easy to just kind of look past him, which is shame on me and shame on others who have done it this year, because Ian Happ has done what he's done every single year in his career. And so I searched his name, Jason, on X, and I went to the latest tab, just like, what are people saying about Ian Happ? And I was trying to find, maybe like a full-blown conversation. And there was one that I ended up finding after scrolling a little bit. And it was someone who had brought up like the trade deadline for the Cubs, and someone mentioned like Ian Happ's our most expendable outfielder. And it's like, well, it's an outfield that has PC and Kyle Tucker, so I guess you're right, but it's also like an extremely good outfield at the moment. Like if you put Ian Happ and plug him into many other outfields in Major League Baseball, he's the best or the second best for that club. So I think it just feeds into that narrative where it's like, don't take for granted what this dude is providing to the Cubs, and especially at the top of the order.
Oh yeah, I mean, just as you said that, I sorted on FanGraph two different statistics that I think are really important to look at. One, which is outfielders who the leaderboard for outfield WRC plus, and in the Cubs outfield, and I'm going to stretch it a little bit with Seiya Suzuki here. I know he's been mostly a DH, but I'm going to call him an outfielder for outfielder's sake for this time. The third in WRC plus in outfield is Kyle Tucker. 9th is Preet Kaur Armstrong, and 14th is Seiya Suzuki. So the Cubs have 3 of the top 14 hitters in outfield in general. In terms of outfield WRC plus, they're second behind only the Yankees, who are getting huge contributions from Aaron Judge and his 227 WRC plus, who probably aren't talking enough about the season that dude is having. As good as the season Cal Raleigh is having, he's not going to be the MVP. It doesn't matter what he does almost at this point. Aaron Judge is having a historically amazing season. But they're the second best outfield in baseball. So when you have Ian Happ, who is the 29th best hitting outfielder according to WRC Plus, you're easy to forget him. But if you put him in any other outfield, you're right. He's probably the best outfielder you have offensively. Like that's what he is. So he's just behind like Cody Bellinger and Lawrence Butler and Tyler Soderstrom and Teoscar Hernandez. There in terms of outfield, he's above Nick Castellanos. He's above Jose Altuve. He's above Jose Rodriguez this year, and it's he's our fourth best hitting outfielder. So it's really easy to forget him this year. Which isn't his fault. He's having a good season, and sadly, for his sake, Seiya Suzuki, Pete Crow Armstrong, and Kyle Tucker are just having amazing seasons, and his is just a relatively good one. Which is what he's done every year.
This
is what he just
above
does.
above average at the plate. Right?
Yeah, just if you are an above average hitter every year and you do good things, sometimes it's easy to miss you when you don't do the like really big things.
Yeah.
He's not going to hit 40 home runs. He wins Gold Gloves, but I think a lot of that he scores much better on DRS than he does OAA, which takes into account a little bit more of the arm. When we talk about that, I don't think he's super rangy, so he doesn't make like the super flashy plays like sometimes that Pete Crow Armstrong makes. So yeah, he's easy. He doesn't steal a lot of bases. So you can forget about him on all those things, but he just goes up there and he gives you really good at bats. He doesn't expand the zone. And he's just a solid baseball player who, like I said, has been probably far too underappreciated even by myself for, quite some time.
It's still weird. When you were listing off those outfielders, you said Jose Altuve. It's still weird. Like that's what's happening in Houston with Altuve, that he's now, patrolling a corner outfield spot.
Weird to think of him as a left fielder.
Yeah. You also brought up Aaron Judge. I do want to throw this in here. You said to me before we clicked to that magical record button that you're actually, again, we're recording Tuesday for Wednesday. You're going to Yankees Reds tonight, meaning Tuesday night. And you brought up the name Aaron Judge. I didn't ask you this off the air. Are you sitting in the outfield, or where are you sitting at?
Honestly, I have no idea.
Judge hit one out last night. I saw.
All I know is, so I'm going up with. For those of you who don't know, I live in Lexington, Kentucky, so I'm just shy of Cincinnati, and one of my very good friends is a Reds fan. Chase Burns is throwing. As a prospect dork. Yeah, I'm gonna go up and check out the debut of one of the best prospects in baseball. But two of my other friends are Yankees fans. Well, one of my friends is Yankees fan. So they're gonna meet us from Louisville. We're gonna go up to the game. All she said was she's pale and she needs to sit somewhere where the sun isn't shining. So I don't exactly know where we're sitting. My friend picked up the cheapest seats that he could find. So I'm guessing upper deck. But yeah, could be outfield. Could be right field. I hope we get a baseball from Aaron Judge. Thing about Aaron Judge is right now, it doesn't really matter where you sit. He could probably get you a baseball.
Yeah.
Because he's having just an unbelievable season. I was just looking at him, but the 227 WRC plus is insane. That is absolutely insane. How good he has been this year. So much so that, we could talk about Cal Raleigh and all the nonsense that he did over the weekend. And you're just like, oh no, all Aaron Judge is doing is hitting 10% better than he normally does. Like that's his best season was last year. And he's got 10 more RC. He's better. He's better. It's amazing. I can't say enough amazing things about what he is as a hitter. I tend to not use necessarily like kind of OPS anymore. I go a little bit further with like WRC plus and stuff like that, but you just kind of pulling it back. He has a 730 something slugging percentage right now. It's stupid. The average hitter it was like around a 700 OPS, and that's what his slugging is. Like it's unbelievable right now what he's doing. So I'm looking forward to see him hit against Chase Burns as well, because Chase Burns has just been fantastic. So, bad news for Cubs fans is that the Reds have some good minor league pitching prospects. I guess if you want to play devil's advocate, pitching prospects are always one pitch away from not being a pitching prospect anymore.
Yeah.
Putting your eggs in one basket for the Reds, certainly with the pitching side of things. We'll see how it goes. I know that I'm not going to look forward to any 2 out of 3 series that has Hunter Green and Chase Burns in it right now, though.
I mentioned you Abbott too. He's
Abbott has had a weird year, because if you go on his like StatCast page, I mean, it's bad. Like you go on his
Yeah.
StatCast page and there's just nothing. There was nothing interesting at the beginning of the year. And then all of a sudden he was able to turn this like low velo, low contact thing into like a really good StatCast page now. He's had a phenomenal season. We saw him earlier this year and they didn't give up any runs, but they battered him all day long with hard hit baseballs. And over the last like couple of months, he has just gone and turned himself into just an awesome pitcher. So yeah, they're nasty. They are the Reds. The Reds can really pitch. So we'll see if their offense can ever keep up with it though.
Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I am Mitch Woodmeyer. You bring up Abbott, and he's a lefty for Cincinnati, a lefty that the Cubs have seen this year. Cubs have struggled against left-handed pitching dating back, well, what is today? June 24th. So yeah, dating back about a month.
Yeah.
Since May 26th, Jason, the Cubs are last in batting average in the majors against lefties, 29th in OBP, 25th in slugging. They struggled to break through against Liberatore on Monday. It felt like they were like on the precipice a couple of times. I think you look back at, was it the fourth or fifth inning, bases loaded, one out, Ian Happ grounds into a double play when the Cubs trailed 2-1, and then the Cardinals exploded, kind of having a home run barrage against Ben Brown themselves. But the Cubs have, the last month now, just haven't been able to crack the code against lefties. It's bizarre too, because you look at, like, if you zoom out the microscope, you look at the season-wide stats, the offense is still incredible for the Cubs. Yeah. The large picture is. So do you look at this, 1 month stretch against left-handed pitching as like, are you chalking it up as like, this is the ebbs and flows of a Major League Baseball season? Or are you like, hey, I'm seeing some underlining things that are kind of concerning with the Cubs against lefties? Because, I was looking at the lineup yesterday and I was trying to break it down individually. The one guy who's been incredible against lefties is Seiya Suzuki this year for the Cubs. And outside of that, there's been guys who have been okay, good, but this last month it's been tough sledding for the lineup when they're facing the southpaws.
Yeah, I think that there's some bad luck that goes along with that. If you're looking at if you look at their number against left-handed pitching just in general, their BABIP's pretty low lately. And I think that's some bad luck. I think it also is to do with who they faced. It's hard to face lefties when the lefties that you're facing are Tariq Skubal, Luzardo, Liberatore, guys who are having really good seasons, and they make it very difficult on lefties. So I think part of it is BABIP related, bad luck. I think part of it is some aspect of who you're facing. And I think part of it is also just that guys like, Justin Turner really haven't worked out this season. I don't think he's going anywhere. I know a lot of people have kind of tried to find ways to replace him. I think he's here probably for the rest of the season. I think he's too important in the clubhouse. They view him as important on there. It's easy for us to sit, in our living rooms and on social media and just say that stuff kind of doesn't matter. But I do think it matters when you're around these people 162 days. Getting along is important. And
Jason Hayward, Game 7 speech, World Series, right?
Right, and I think those things are those.
I'm with you.
Beyond those go beyond the stats, and I'm an analytics guy, and the Cubs are an analytics team, and yet if you hear them talk about Justin Turner all the time, they always talk about those things, and I don't think that's an accident. So I don't think he's going anywhere. I also don't think that the solution to their issues with left-handed pitching, when I've seen this a lot on social media, on Reddit, on Blue Sky, on X, and on our forums on Northside Baseball, it's more Michael Busch, and that's not the answer either. The answer is not more Michael Busch. It's less Justin Turner, and I think that's going to be an outside solution. While I don't think Justin Turner is going anywhere, I do think that you can take away some of his duties. The Cubs don't use their 26 guy very often. When was the last time you remember John Birdie playing?
It's crazy.
Right. He exists. He exists on the bench I don't know what he does. They've been using
Vibes guy.
Vibes guy, right? They've been using Brujan more and more lately. So I think that outside of the organization, you can bring in a different version of Justin Turner. I actually kind of did a little research on that. Jake Berger from Texas and Ramon Urias from Baltimore, I think, are two teams that aren't necessarily going very far right this moment. I think both could be sellers on these pieces, especially. Berger has a 123 WRC plus on the season against left-handed pitching. Ramon Urias has a 132. Both of them can play first base, third base type stuff. They could DH. They're not very good against right-handers. They are good against left-handers. Think that they could replace a John Birdie. I don't think either of them is very expensive at the deadline. Those are just two names that I just did some real quick research on. I'm sure there are other ones out there that you could pick up. But I think that the answer against lefties is, one, maybe not facing as all of your lefties, Luzardo, Skubal, Liberatore kind of guys. Two, getting a little bit of that BABIP up to kind of turn the tide. Looking back, you said May 26th. Just in general, since May 26th, the Cubs have the worst BABIP in baseball over that time.
Wow.
They're not hitting more. They're not hitting bad. They're hitting more hard balls and left soft contact than they were on the season. So they're hitting more hard contact, less soft contact. They're not striking out anymore. They're not walking. They're walking a little bit less, but their BABIP is super low. It's 258. That's 50 points off to where it was on their career on the season line. So part of this, I think, is just bad BABIP luck. They've had some bad luck. Part of that is also, I don't want to say it's all bad luck. You're going to have a lower BABIP when you face Tariq Skubal. So I think there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation that goes along there as well. And then part of that, I think, is Justin Turner just not being the guy that we kind of hope for. Like I said, I think you can relegate him to the John Birdie vibes guy right now. He doesn't have to play very much, but he can still be kind of a clubhouse guy, and you can go out and get a Ramon Urias, and that's somebody who could do something. One other name that I'll kind of bring up here, speaking of the Reds, they just designated for assignment Candelario. Yeah. And I know he's been terrible. Listen, I know he's been terrible. I don't think you sign him to a Major League Baseball contract. I don't think many teams are going to sign him to an MLB contract. But the Cubs are also running Chase Strumpf at third base, Darius Hill at DH in Iowa sometimes. You can't tell me that signing him to a minor league contract, if you can find something that you think can work out there, give him a month in Iowa. Maybe that's a solution too. He's a switch hitter. He's been a good hitter Major League in the past. He's not like 45 years old. I think he's like 32. I have to look that up. He's like, I think he's 31 or 32. He's not super old. He could be a decent reclamation project if you're looking on the data and you like what you can see. Where I think he's a low risk gamble there. So maybe that's another option that the Cubs could go with. We'll see what the answer is. I don't know if you have maybe like I don't know what you think your solutions are, or if you would kind of come up with a fix to the problem against lefties yourself.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, luck is definitely factoring into it. Oftentimes, you and I have said some of this stuff is just chalked up to baseball, and it sounds cliche and cheesy at times, but it's the nature of the beast when you're playing a 162 game season. I do think there's one more interesting angle to this that initially I didn't jot down, I didn't toss your way that we would be discussing, but I just am curious on your thoughts because you bring up, Brujan and Birdie. When's the last time we've seen him play, and Turner and all these guys that at times could give you spot duty at third base, Brujan maybe second, and Turner first base, of course. What are your thoughts on Matt Shaw's recent stretch? Because he seems to be kind of reverting back to a guy that's struggling at the plate. I don't know if it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks, somewhere within that stretch. It seems like is that just, rookie going through kind of that roller coaster ride type thing again? Or are you seeing anything underlying where it's like, ooh, I don't like this?
He's struggling on fastballs right now. I don't know if you've been paying much attention the last couple of days, but he's moved his hands. His hands are now up.
I did not
they were
notice
much.
that. Yeah.
It's actually, speaking of Ian Happ, if you go and you look, the first stance that I look at when I see when I see Ian Happ's right hand stance, it's actually Matt Shaw's now right hand stance. He's clearly borrowing some of that. The lower leg kick that kind of like pauses through. The hand placement's up. I know on one hand, you look at the numbers and you're like, it's not all that great. I know everybody talks about the exit velocities. Last night, he had a 103-mile-an-hour ball off the bat that went right to Arenado. That's not his fault. That's just bad luck when you hit those kinds of things. With Matt Shaw, I know that the last couple of weeks haven't been great. They're throwing more inside fastballs up high. So they've adjusted. And when we talk rookies, we have to realize that it's an adjustment, readjustment, both with him and the league. He came back after struggling his initial time with low and outside pitches. What happens? League starts throwing low and outside. He starts crushing low and outside. League says, oh, can't do that anymore. Got to readjust. Now we'll go high and inside with fastballs. So what is Matt Shaw doing? Matt Shaw's adjusting to inside fastballs now. I've seen, I think, again, on social media, on our own forums, a thought that maybe they need to think about going away from him. But this is what rookies do. If you are truly going to bring a rookie up this year, in this day and age, it's going to suck for months. Like, it really is. Wyatt Langford was bad for 5 months last year until he figured it out at the end of the year. And now he's a good player. Wyatt Langford's a good player now. But it takes a little bit of time for these players to
Jackson Holliday's a extreme example of that. Like a guy who was, top pick, and he
look at
came
Dylan
up,
Cruz.
didn't work last year, got sent back down, called back up, sent back down, called back up, and trying to just find his footing with Baltimore. There's a lot of examples.
Dylan Cruz is another one. He's been terrible. The league is so hard. I'm going to see Chase Burns's start tonight, and I think that this is a good symptom or a good explanation for why this is happening. Cade Horton is another. Chase Burns has pitched 60 minor league innings ever. He pitched 2 times in AAA. 2 times in AAA. So what you're seeing are teams are taking Chase Burns, who are throwing 98 miles an hour, and they're saying, listen, I got 2 options with Chase Burns. He's a pitcher. I know he's going to get hurt at some point. At some point in the next few years, I expect him to blow his arm out and expect him to miss a full season and a half potentially. So where do I want those innings to be? I'm the Reds. I'm looking at this year. Maybe I can get in as a wild card. So do I let Chase Burns develop 40 more innings in Louisville with the bats, push myself out of contention? Or do I call him up in June? He's barely pitched in AAA, but listen, 98 with that shape plays anywhere. You don't really need to develop that very much. So you bring him up now. Well, guys like Matt Shaw and hitters aren't seeing that in AAA now because teams are taking their Chase Burns and they're saying, go pitch in the major leagues. I'm not going to have you waste your bullets in AAA. But then it creates a larger skill gap between AAA and Major League than we've seen ever before. As teams know their pitchers are blowing their arms out, they're not going to waste them there. So Matt Shaw now is coming up to the Major Leagues, and instead of maybe seeing a Chase Burns pretty often in AAA, there's no Chase Burns to see unless you catch him the 12 innings that he's down there. A lot of these guys in AAA are guys, look at the Cubs AAA rotation right now. It's guys like Kenta Maeda. It's guys like, no shade to him. I think Jordan Wicks is a fine pitcher, and I think there's still upside there. But Jordan Wicks isn't blowing anybody away with fastball velocity either. I like Jordan Wicks, but he's not 98. He doesn't have this kind of a fastball. Paul Skeen's the same way. These guys don't stay in the minors very often, so they never see it. So they come up to the majors and they struggle. I do think that he's making some progress. I think the Cubs have had recent history on working with mechanics for rookies. Pete Crow Armstrong, Miguel Amaya are just 2 of them in the lineups right now, or have been successful this year with mechanical changes. So I feel confident that he'll get there, and I don't think they need to replace him yet. But he would certainly, I think, help out against lefties as well if he can figure this out. Like I said, he 103 miles an hour off the bat last night in his first at bat. I'm not gonna really be too negative about that. I know it was a line out. Happens. His defense looks a lot better. I do think he'll improve, and I think we just kind of have to roll with it. Like, this is what rookies do.
It'd probably be more pressing if they had like a ready solution format. Like right now, if they were like, man, we think maybe Shaw, needs another break, another, recalibration down in Iowa, but who the hell are you plugging in every day at third base? Are you going to Birdie, Bruhan, Turner? Like, no thanks.
No, I don't.
Let's ride it
I
out
don't
with
think
Matt
there's
Shaw.
any reason to. We can
I'm
maybe
with
talk
you.
about it at the end of July if he's still like a 70 WRC plus guy. But I do think he's going to make some of those changes. I do think he'll get on a hot streak here in a little bit. I know a lot of people concerned about the exit velocities. I'm not so concerned about that. He's a high contact, high swing guy. You see that with low exit velocities. They turn strikeouts into weak ground balls. And that data gets thrown off a little bit with that. I'm less concerned about that. I just think it's kind of a learning process. We're going to have to deal with it. And if you want to develop a rookie hitter nowadays, basically you have to block off 3 to 5 months of like 80 WRC plus and
growing pains.
Yeah, this is what it is. I'm going to deal with this, and I'm going to come out better on the back end. I think if the Cubs had panicked with players like Miguel Amaya, with Pete Crow Armstrong, with Michael Busch, after initial struggles. Maybe the Cubs aren't where they are today because those players grow. And I'm not saying that Matt Shaw is going to be like a top 10 like player in baseball, like Pete Crow Armstrong's been. Just that this is what growing a rookie is nowadays. You have to deal with it. And he's not going to see this pitching level at AAA. We know Matt Shaw's kind of done with AAA at this point, so you kind of have to let him play at the major league level if you're going to develop him.
Yeah, I think the one thing that will help him out and does help him out is this lineup and this offense.
Yeah,
Oftentimes you have like a highly touted prospect. There was so much momentum, so much dialogue around Matt Shaw at the end of last year. Entering this offseason and then coming into spring training, Jason, where there's big expectations, and I don't think there's I don't think there's any pressure on him like that. The Cubs are like, we need you to absolutely deliver for us to have a shot. It's not like that. This lineup is littered with really, really good talent. So
right.
it's not a situation where you're calling up a prospect and it's like, man, we could really use you. Like, it'd be awesome if Matt Shaw was, tearing the cover off the ball on a more consistent basis. But I think the Cubs will be able to exercise patience, like you said, with this kind of time frame this year to try to get him right and get him on the straight and narrow. So
I
I'm not too worried about it either.
I think that's the path for him.
Yeah, I'm not too worried. Northside Baseball Podcast, Mitch Widmeyer, Jason Ross. Minor league report time. We do it every week. At least every week you're on. We do the minor league report. Who's standing out? Who's we don't typically talk about the negative. Once in a while, you'll throw in like, "Oh, this guy's kind of struggling lately," but it's more of an optimistic take of the minor league report.
Yeah, funny you brought that up. There is going to be a player that I'm going to be a little down on.
Okay, that's fine. It's all yours.
Yeah,
it'll
be a name that I don't think a lot of people will be expecting from it. So, or if you haven't been following, maybe you will be expecting it if you have been. But anyways, we'll kick it off with Jackson Wiggins again. He's kind of the leadoff report lately. He's been so good. He did have a not great start last week. He walked 4, which walks were kind of one of the concerns coming out of college from him. So he's kept it down to a pretty controllable level so far. But 4 walks in 4 innings isn't great. It was super hot. The weather right now, I think, is rough. I think pitching is going to struggle a little bit, kind of moving forward for the next couple of weeks. If you're living anywhere right now, it's brutal outside. I think just checking on my current weather app here in Lexington, it's 93 degrees. I know my partner's out in New Haven, Connecticut. And you would think maybe Connecticut will be, it's like 94. It's hot everywhere right now. So these prospects and these guys are kind of going through it. So I think he gassed out kind of late. It was really hot. So I'll give him a little bit of a break there. I'll bring up Ryan Gallagher again too. I've talked about him a few times. He had an okay start, gave up a couple home runs, went 5 2/3, struck out 6. Not his best start, not his worst start, was a start. One of the guys I do want to talk about. So 2 kind of like prospect dork guys to bring up. One is, I think, a little bit less for the sickos, and the second guy I'm going to bring up is that's my real deep cut for the week. So the Cubs have seen Ethan Flanagan debut recently in June. If you don't know Ethan Flanagan, he was a 17th round pick in 2023 out of UCLA. He's only 22 years old, 23. He was 21 when he came out. So he was actually a younger college guy that they were able to sign in the 17th round. Usually you don't see those. So that the Cubs kind of thought highly of him to give him enough money to get him out of college in that. He lost all of last year with an arm injury and is just coming back. He's looked pretty good in Myrtle Beach so far. He's been striking guys out down there. I'm not getting any velocity kind of reports on him. Myrtle Beach doesn't show those a lot of times, so I can't tell you where his velo is. But he looks solid down there in Myrtle Beach. I think he's probably going to be somebody who will move up to South Bend, especially when somebody like Ryan Gallagher gets the bump. Though, if you guys are looking for quick bump ups right now, don't. I have a feeling a lot of times around July is when the Cubs bump up a bunch of guys. They move them up. I have a feeling this year that's going to get pushed back 1 month. And I think the trade deadline is going to be important on that.
Ask if that's related. Yeah.
I think the Cubs are going to try to hide some guys. You can hide a Ryan Gallagher in South Bend better than you can in Knoxville. And that's because at 23, a former college pitcher, he's having success at high A. It's not that impressive. We see this kind of every year. I know he's made fastball velocity increases, and I'm sure scouts will say that as well. But without him showing it against Knoxville hitters in Double A, well, it's not as impressive, and you can still have that doubt in your mind, even if you're doing scouting, even if these teams are knowledgeable. I'm not saying that I know more than the Washington Nationals are going to know, but if you don't have that data against Double A pitching, Double A hitting, it's harder to be assured of yourself. So I have a feeling guys like Jackson Wiggins, Ryan Gallagher, Ethan Flanagan are going to hide in the lower levels a little bit longer than they normally will, just to not have that data against higher level hitting so that the Cubs can kind of hide these guys. It's just a hunch. Next week they'll probably all move up a level and I'll look stupid. But I have a feeling that maybe that's what we're looking at here. If you want a real deep cut pitcher, the name I'm going to throw out there is Jackson Kirkpatrick. He is somebody, I fell down a rabbit hole right before this. It's why I couldn't do it a little earlier. Jackson Kirkpatrick is a 22-year-old reliever in Myrtle Beach. Normally, I would not be getting excited for either a 22-year-old at Myrtle Beach or a reliever at 22 at Myrtle Beach, but I'm excited about Jackson Kirkpatrick a little bit. He is 6'7", and he was signed as a free agent. So he had been in other organizations. They cut him loose. It wasn't working. He went to Tread Athletics over the offseason. Tread Athletics is important because Tyler Zombro, the Cubs pitching specialist who they brought in this year, is one of the lead guys at Tread.
Oh.
So there's a connection here, and probably why Jackson ended up with us. Well, there's a great video that Tread Athletics put out there on Jackson Kirkpatrick's development and what they did. They changed his fastball shape. He throws 98. He's 6'7". He throws 98. We've got stuff here, but his fastball shape was bad. You can throw 98, but if it's flat and it doesn't move and it's just straight, major league hitters can hit that. That's not that impressive anymore. It sounds impressive. In Major League, not that impressive anymore. They changed his shape. They added a sweeper. They changed his rubber placement. They changed his release point. They have eliminated the waste strikes, those strikes that are so bad that the pitches that nobody's going to swing at. So waste pitches. They've gotten those closer to the zone, and he's striking out 42% of the hitters that he's facing in Myrtle Beach right now. The walk rate's still a little elevated. He's 6'7". The reality is that big pitchers struggle with command more because there's more to command. If you are 6 foot, there's less of you. If you're 6'7", there's an extra 7 inches of you, but that's longer arms, longer legs, longer midsections. That's more to pinpoint and hone in. So I think walks are going to be kind of a part of his game, but he's a guy that if you're a real prospect sicko, you pay attention to him. Back pocket his name. You're not seeing him for a couple years. It's a deep dive cut. It's unlikely he ever makes a major league game, but 6'7" relievers who throw 98 also move fast. If he could just get those walks down to like 11%, if he's walking 11% of his hitters, with that velocity, yeah, he could be a power arm down the road. So that was just a fun little kind of prospect cut for you.
One thing about that too. One
Yeah.
thing, how big of a difference is it for a hitter? I've seen this talked about before. When you're used to, facing guys on the rubber who are, let's say, 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", and then all of a sudden 6'7's throwing down at you like that. I would imagine for a hitter that is not too comfortable. Not the easiest thing to sort of adjust to when you're in the box seeing 6'7" hurling 98.
It's that extension. If you're throwing 98 and you're throwing 6 foot, you're 6'8", the extension is a few extra inches deep. And as that ball is released deeper and deeper, it means that there is less of a reaction time. I can't say I've ever faced 98. I've never faced 98. I have hit against guys who throw 90. I do play adult baseball nowadays, and it's far off from major league pitching. I have faced a couple major league hitters. We have a former major league pitcher who's played in our league for the last couple of years. Do have a couple hits off of him, so I'll put that brag out. Do have a lot of strikeouts. I can hit a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. I cannot hit a major league slider. They make me look dumb. Robbie's got a pretty nasty breaking ball. I don't feel so bad. He struck out over an inning, over a hitter in the majors over the course of 5 years. He pitched with the Red Sox and the Rangers. He pitched in the playoffs. Striking out me. Listen, he's got a far list of guys that he struck out that are better than me. So I'm not too ashamed with it. But actually the weirdest thing is, and I don't think people realize, is the sidearm guys. Oh man, that's nasty. You don't have to throw hard to throw sidearm to be nasty. It changes your whole vision. Just for anybody out there who's never hit against sidearms, you get so used to having a window. Like when I'm hitting, I'm looking for a window, usually around like the ear of a pitcher. That's where the ball's coming. Look at somebody's knee and try to hit. That's weird. It's very weird because that's what you have to do when these guys come in sidearm. You're looking at their knees, and it changes everything. So don't, like, the next time you're like, man, how did that guy miss that 85 mile an hour fastball that's coming sidearm? That's how. It's weird. It's funky. So yeah, just the shape of a pitcher, the release point, it messes with you. And just from my extremely limited experience comparatively, if I would imagine for a major league hitter seeing 98 coming from 6'8" is just unbelievable.
Yeah. Yep.
Unbelievable. Couple other guys we'll highlight. We'll talk some hitters now. I haven't talked hitters for like last week or so I kind of wanted to do a big hitter kind of jump. Owen Casey making some progress with the strikeouts and the whiffs. Wrote an article about him recently on Northside Baseball. If you weren't able to join us in the comment section and talk about that, I had a lot of good reaction to that. The whiff rate has dropped month on month for him. He seems to be swinging a little bit more often in the zone earlier in the count. The chase rate has kind of fluctuated up and down, but the strikeout rate has dropped. He struck out only 20% last week. Good sign. Under 30% for the month. Good sign. Power has been up. So I think we're seeing some progress there with contact rate and swing. So positives there. I did say I was going to bring in a negative, and I do want to talk about somebody who I think has had a pretty rough year and some red flaggy stuff. And that's Kevin Alcantara. We talked about him positively at the beginning of the season as somebody who could, I know Matt wrote that he could even like Wally Pipp PCA if he got hurt early this season. I think now 3 months later, we know that's just not happening. PCA's top 10, WAR player in baseball, and Kevin Alcantara's not had a good season in Iowa. And the red flag stuff comes from not fastballs. Against fastballs, he's crushing, which is great. He's a tall, lanky hitter with long levers. And a lot of times, tall, lanky hitters with long levers struggle with fastballs up. It's hard to get that much of your body to hit pitches up. So if you throw pitches fast up, usually players like Kevin Alcantara can struggle. He's not. He's crushing fastballs. However, if it's not a fastball, he's swinging and missing over 40% of the time. That's really red flaggy. I don't think it's like a forever red flag. It's not something that can't be fixed, but he's struggling on not fastballs. So I'm a little concerned with that. If you ask me right now, who's my favorite prospect to trade from when it comes in a month, it'd be Kevin Alcantara. It's been Alcantara probably for a little bit of time. I think he's a great player, but with Pete Crow Armstrong at center field, it takes away his unicorn status. Yeah. No, it takes away his unicorn status of being a 6'6", 25 home run guy who can play center field adequately. He could be a Gold Glove right fielder. He could be an above average center fielder. He's 6'6". We don't see that. That's a unicorn. So I've kind of been on that route just in general, but also those red flags I think concern me a little bit. Not forever. It can be fixed, but yeah, I did want to highlight it. I try to be positive but real when we talk about minor league reports, and so we want to kind of point those things out. Moises Ballesteros had a good week. He had a home run, 121 WRC plus. He's been 14% better than league average since returning to Iowa. It's not sexy. It's not like the unbelievable numbers that he started with, but this is baseball. He's probably working on some things under the hood. He's still getting better defensively. I'm not worried about it. So I don't think he's putting up like the video game numbers, but he doesn't have to put up video game numbers to have a good season. My buddy Ivan Brettauer having a funny month. 148 WRC plus, strikeouts down to 21%, hasn't hit a home run. He's 6'6". He's 220 pounds. He hasn't hit a home run. Has 5 doubles, hoping that double power turns into home run power. But he's kind of a conundrum right now in that he's like turned into almost kind of like a low slug corner outfielder who gets on base all the time, but he looks like Aaron Judge, which is just a weird. It's a weird profile. We'll see how it keeps going. I'm still encouraged by it. My hope is that with mechanical changes, he learns how to tap back into that power a little bit more. And then kind of wanted to bring up one other kind of deeper cut prospect, which is Carter Trice. Carter Trice is a former mid-round pick from a couple years ago. He's having a really good season down in South Bend. He's he's been 122% better than league average this month. He's had a huge June. He's just 22 years old. He's a really good, he's an interesting little player. Actually, I take that back. He's 220 was over the last week. Sorry. Read my notes a little bit wrong, but he's got a 151 WRC plus on the season. I don't think we've talked about him enough. He is a left-handed first base outfielder, right-handed first base outfielder. But really interesting little player. They got him out of NC State a couple years ago. He actually used to catch a little, not a catcher anymore. But interesting little profile. Him and Ivan Brettauer are both 22, both at South Bend, both having good seasons. And when I said guys who aren't going up a level, I think it's interesting that both of these guys are former college players. Brettauer is newer to the organization than Carter Trice is. Trice has been here since 2023. But neither have been promoted to Knoxville, who has basically anywhere. Their team is terrible. Knoxville has none of the interesting prospects outside of like Jackson Wiggins on it. They're pretty devoid of talent. And I think most other years, like last year, you'd see both of these guys in Knoxville by now, and you don't. And I do think that there's probably some hiding. If I were a team and I was looking at like a lower level lottery ticket, Carter Trice would be somebody I'd be interested in. Ivan Brettauer would be somebody I'd be interested in. And if I don't know how much a 22-year-old's doing against kind of double A pitching, then I still don't have all the data that I need. So again, I have a sneaking suspicion that that the Cubs are trying to hide some of these guys. So if you see somebody doing really well at a lower level who's a little older than maybe you would normally expect, the way that I'm reading that from right now is that I think the Cubs actually like those guys, and they are trying to keep their data set limited for when it comes to trade deadline, because they would like to keep as many of those guys as possible. But that's just my read on it. I'm not in the organization, but that's kind of how I felt about it. I don't think I'm alone on that thought process. We'll see what ends up happening, but I have a feeling they're going to try to hide a couple of those guys.
Yeah, and the last two names you mentioned with your boy Ivan and then Carter Trice, you said those aren't names that if the Cubs are acquiring a starting caliber arm or going to a bullpen arm, those aren't names that you build a trade around. But I like that you use the phrase lottery ticket.
Yeah, that's what they are.
Because you throw them in on the back end when the other team says, well, we also want, take your chance with Ivan Brettauer or Trice, throw them in as a lottery ticket option. And the Cubs kind of have to, then ponder it. And typically they're probably going to say, yeah, we're not going to let that ruin the trade if we're acquiring a number 2 pitcher for, our staff right now in Chicago. And those are for baseball junkies, those can be the fun players that when your team is on the receiving end of giving up the major league ready talent and getting back, a bevy of prospects, those can be the fun guys to dive into, those lottery ticket sort of options.
Kyle Hendricks was one of those. Taking it back a couple years ago, he was not the prized receipt of that trade. He was a low velocity, low walk pitcher, and I think he was just kind of added into the deal, and he turned out to be a phenomenal player. Just a really phenomenal player. Those kinds of guys can work out eventually. Daniel Palencia was was one of those guys. He was in a trade with Oakland. Dan Kantrovitz picked him out of that trade. He wasn't maybe the number one name in there. He was a low level lottery ticket pitcher from the lower system. And, all he's done is have an interesting back end relief career that's starting to carve out with the Cubs. You can find lottery tickets, and my guess is that the Cubs would like to hide as many Ryan Gallagher's, Ivan Brett Towers, Carter Trice's away from prying eyes as much as possible. Because if these guys show up to Knoxville and immediately start making noise at AA, then you can say, oh,
Pops up on
okay.
a radar.
Yeah, they pop up on the radar a little bit more. A team is going to be more interested in those kinds of guys when, I think if you're asking the Cubs, who would they like to throw in? Like a Chase Strump from like Iowa would probably be somebody that they would probably be more comfortable with doing. I mean, I know I would, 27-year-old former second round pick who's having a good year in Iowa, but I think he's probably Patrick Wisdom at best. That's a guy that I'd like to throw in more so than, Carter Trice, who I think could maybe be a little bit, maybe have some extra squeeze down the road, some extra ceiling, even if he's further away.
Let's finish up with this. By the way, great minor league report as always. Super informative. A couple of those names that I haven't even heard much about that are being brought to the table.
I try to bring the prospect sicko names. I think if you're out there, and this is no shade to anybody. I think a lot of times we hear about some of those higher end guys. We've been a little bit, kind of hear about Owen Casey or Kevin Alcantara or Moises Ballesteros. Even just on the broadcast. And I don't know, maybe I try to bring some of that kind of like at the lower level stuff that you can't find everywhere. So I think that's fun. And it also kind of plays the what if game. I mean, there's a world where Jackson Kirkpatrick turns into Brad Keller. He's 6'7". He throws 70 miles. He throws 98 miles an hour. There's a chance that he's the Brad Keller, and telling those stories, I think, is really interesting right now. More so than, continuing to talk about some of the guys that we probably heard of. At least I get excited about that, seeing the progress that Tread Athletics has taken Kirkpatrick into. That's a cool story. It's like Riley Martin last week. I love those kinds of stories. They're the fun ones in my opinion.
100%. Let's finish up with this. All signs, all indicators. I mean, Craig Counsell has confirmed that Shota Imanaga should be returning on Thursday for the Cubs, making the start against the Cardinals in the finale of that 4-game set. Obviously, a lot of excitement to get Shota back. Been kind of a weird year for the rotation. Steele exits early on in the year, done for the year. Shota has now been gone for quite some time, set to return. Cubs, of course, rumors abound that they're going to add a starting pitcher or a bullpen arm, maybe both, before the deadline.
Potentially in the next 10 days, according to
Bruce report. I saw that report. Yeah, that they're trying to close in on something soon. But Shota returns. I think it brings up an obvious question, but also, I think there is an obvious answer, but there's other names you could throw out there. So the question is, what's the move, the corresponding move, when Shota Imanaga returns on Thursday? I believe most people are going to say, send Ben Brown to Iowa, let him recalibrate, figure things out, kind of maybe exhale, take a deep breath, exhale, and, sort of get your gatherings back. I will note it was a rough start. It started so good on Monday against St. Louis. Like, I thought Ben Brown looked like a rock star the first, 3 innings, and then it was a home run parade, and it kind of differed. I mean, as well as I do, Jason, as well as many Cub fans listening, watching this, Ben Brown's struggles this year have often been in the first inning. Like, if he struggles, it is in the first inning right out of the gates where you're like, oh no. And then he's really settled down after that in a lot of his starts. This was different on Monday, where first inning, no problem. Second inning, no problem. Third inning, no problem. And then all of a sudden the Cardinals bats broke out. And so I do believe that the obvious answer is Shota comes back, and because he's coming back to the rotation, and so that gives you 6. And then the numbers game says if you don't want a 6-man rotation, Ben Brown could go down to Iowa. I will note Craig Counsell said after the game on Monday, He had like a longer form answer about Ben Brown, but within it, he said, and I quote, "It's hard to see right now for many, but there is growth happening," talking about
Mhm.
Ben Brown. So I think that's the obvious answer. I am with you that I don't believe Justin Turner is going anywhere.
No.
If we're talking about the on field production, me personally, Jason, I've seen what I need to see with Justin Turner. Like it's to me, it's just it's not cutting it. I don't believe there's going to be a corner turn because he's not going to have the at bats. He's not going to have the sample size to try to do it. He's going to get looks here and there pretty sparingly. But if you want to talk about a name that I think other people will bring up, it will be Justin Turner. But again, you talked about clubhouse presence, leadership, all that stuff has been around World Series teams. Like that stuff does matter. I'm sure the Cubs value it. They value Turner for those reasons. Could be another name that people toss out there, though, as a possibility. Interested to hear what you think. I would have a hunch or a suspicion that, I'm not saying the Cubs are thinking this. Maybe they are. But most Cubs fans are just going to assume that Ben Brown is the name that gets sent down when Shota comes back on Thursday.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you. That's the name that I think is going to get sent down.
Yeah. Yep.
They can't really do a hitter because you're limited to 13 pitchers on your
Yeah.
staff, so it's got to be a pitcher that rolls. It could be Michael Fulmer. I think that he would be an easy DFA candidate if they really need to. But I think it's Ben Brown. If I think what we're going to see is this. I think Ben Brown is going to go to Iowa, and then we're not going to see him in Iowa for a little bit. He's going to go what's called the developmental list. The developmental list is something that only exists in the minor leagues. You can almost think of it as like an IL, but for getting better. So you don't have to pitch them in games. You use the developmental list to basically say, hey, I'm going to pull this guy out of the team for a little bit. We're going to send him somewhere. We're going to put him in the pitch lab. We're going to work with him that way. I don't think that the Cubs are really going to be using the dev list for him for developmental purposes. I think it's going to be to save some innings purposes. And that's a cool way that you don't have to put him on the Iowa roster, eating up a spot, but he can go do something. And he can take a little bit of a break. I think he needs a break. I think mentally he needs a timeout. And then I think when you see him come back, he's going to be throwing maybe 1 to 2 innings, and he's going to be starting to ramp up for a bullpen spot after the trade deadline. That's my guess is what we're going to do with Ben Brown. His innings do need to be limited. The reality on Ben Brown is that he just doesn't have a lot of innings in his career. He's already up to 80 innings this year, which is 30 more, basically 25 more than he had last year, which is important. The year before that, in 2023, he had 92 innings. The year before that, in 2021, he had 104 innings. He probably doesn't have that many more innings this year. Even at 80, he's probably got, my guess is 40, 45 innings left. And I think that the goal is you give him a month off, you bring him back, you can use him, you can use 30 innings out of the bullpen as maybe more of a long guy, as somebody who can go in and do that Brad Keller role that he's in right now. Whereas, I think Brad Keller's been amazing, but the way that the Cubs have used him is basically like high leverage 2-inning guy. What if Ben Brown did that and then you use Brad Keller as also high leverage guy at the end of the game more often than they probably have this year? So I think Ben Brown's got that kind of a thing. That's my guess is that it'll have. You did bring up the development that's going on, and there is development. One thing that people probably haven't noticed, he's throwing harder. He's upped his velocity over the course of the last little bit. So if we're looking at his velocity on the season, he's sitting at about 95.8 miles per hour on his fastball. Since May 19th, he's at 96.4. Since June 6th, he's at 96.6. So we're seeing an increase in fastball velocity, which I think is important for him. He needs a little bit of that. We've seen extra changeups being thrown. I think he's making developments. He's making progress. And, a popular term in the prospect community is the idea that development is not linear. And it's not like an easy chart of like make a progress, see a progress, make a progress, see a progress. A lot of times the progress is happening and you're not always seeing it in the numbers. Sometimes you have to take 2 steps back to take 3 steps forward. And I think maybe we're seeing a little bit of that with Ben Brown. His knuckle curve has gone up a mile per hour as well. So I think that these are things that we are seeing happening underneath the hood of Ben Brown. I don't know where it's all going, where we will be at the end of it, but I'm interested in it. I do think he will go down and do some kind of like bullpenny stuff. Um, but I'm hoping that can maybe like that doesn't mean he's a bullpen forever. He could be a starter next year with the development. That's what I think. I don't. I tried to like just even sitting here and like thinking about it. I tried to come up with a creative like solution elsewhere. Like, well, maybe they go and they like do this, or they probably send this guy down. I don't see it. I think this will be a fairly straightforward answer, and that Ben Brown will probably head back to Iowa. But I think maybe Craig's words were kind of interesting there, that the development's happening. I think he said that to kind of remind us that like things are still happening, that they think good things of him. But I do think that probably signals that he is going back to Iowa for a little bit. But I don't think he's like been horrible. I think the numbers maybe look a little worse than maybe he's been all the time. But I'm still excited for him. I think he can still
Yeah.
be a good player.
I'm going to play contrarian if that's all right, just
Yeah.
to throw out a different option. I'm with you. It seems like it's Ben Brown, like the move. Once Shota comes back Thursday, the writing does kind of seem like it's on the wall with this one, and the likely pathway is AAA. Like you said, maybe give him some time off, clear the mind a little bit, and then come
Yeah.
back. Yeah, you're talking about the innings that he's thrown throughout the year and how he's kind of reaching that threshold or close to it. Just to play contrarian, if I look at the Cubs bullpen right now, and Genesis Cabrera DFA'd and then ends up, back in AAA with Iowa, and they bring up Nate Pearson, right? That didn't work out again. Nate Pearson down, bring up Michael Fulmer. You stole my thunder a little bit because you brought up Fulmer's name earlier. Is there, just to play contrarian, is there any chance they would bring back Shota on Thursday, DFA Fulmer, and say, let's keep Ben Brown up here, but let's just move him to the bullpen now? Do you think there's any chance of that?
I mean, it's not impossible. I
Yeah.
think you could. I think you could maybe see it. I do think that Michael Fulmer has probably been brought up more so for a, and I think in that case you'd say the reason they brought up Michael Fulmer is he's here for a short edition, kind of show everybody what he can do, and then you send him on his way, back down to where he was. He came up, he pitched yesterday. I guess if you want to say that they gave him basically the first chance that things were bad in a game, where it was kind of out of pocket, and it wasn't, there wasn't really going to be much of a chance, and they gave him that time yesterday to come out and throw. He didn't look bad out there. He didn't look, maybe amazing, but he looked pretty good out there. Gave up a couple hits, didn't strike anybody out, didn't walk anybody. I think I didn't see looking at the fastball velocity. He's hitting 95 on that, averaging about 94. So maybe it was like an audition for the rest of the league, kind of doing him a solid type of a thing. I do think that they'll probably keep him around a little bit. Maybe even just until they like bring up a Jack Neely, or they need the 40-man spot when Miguel like Amaya comes back, or somebody off of the 60 that they want to. So we'll see what ends up happening. I wouldn't say never, but I do think that they have to limit Ben Brown's innings somehow. And I think a few weeks on the developmental list in Iowa is an easy answer to that. Like I said, I would guess he's got 40 innings left. And if you give him 3 weeks off through maybe, July's All-Star break, you start ramping him back up in Iowa for a couple weeks, kind of 2-3 innings at a time. You give him 4 starts at that. That's 80 or 40. And then you've got maybe 30 some innings that you can play out of the bullpen. That'd be 15 innings for the last 2 months. In my head, I think the maths out that way. And then my guess would be is if the Cubs are looking to acquire another starting pitcher, that's probably Cade Horton's time to head back to Iowa and eat up some innings as well, take some break. Or maybe it's Colin Ray, but it doesn't sound like it's Colin Ray. the team seems okay with Colin Ray eating up innings. I know fans are probably going to say, hey, Ray's the worst starter out of that range. And I agree. He probably is.
Yeah.
And he probably, but where the Cubs are at, in the division, I know it doesn't feel like we've won the division yet because we haven't, but we're also in a pretty stable place where having Colin Ray probably eat up those innings is not like,
not the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world, right? Even if he's not pitching great, what is he going to be 5 games worse than a replacement player in the next 2 months? No, he's not going to be that bad. He can probably eat up innings until August. Then you can maybe bring up Cade Horton again and let him go. So I think it'll be interesting to see if this Bruce Levine trade happens. He called it a good young veteran, which seems contradictory to begin with. Young and veteran,
young and veteran together.
Yeah. It was a weird way of saying it. He did say it wasn't Sandy Alcantara, so that's not what it was. I don't know. He couldn't figure out the name, but he was pretty confident that it wasn't Alcantara from Miami, and it was a good young veteran. Which I don't know. I've been racking my head to try to figure out who that is. Merrill Kelly is a good veteran, but he's 34, so he's not young. So it'll be interesting to see where that ends up, if it ends up with something, because I think that'll probably also inform us on, I think it'll make sense like retroactively with what they end up doing.
How old's Gallen? Is Gallen a young veteran?
He's like 29. Yeah. The problem is like he was good. He's been terrible this year.
Yeah, that's true.
But I guess if you want to look into like Tread Athletics and what they do well and what the Cubs do well, Gallen's issue has been the fastball this year. He's lost some velocity. He's lost some shape. He's throwing it too often. The Cubs are like the kings this year of like low fastball velocity, high usage guys. So like if you wanted somebody who I thought maybe Zombro and them would be like interested in, Gallen could be a guy that they could look at and be like, oh wait, we've got the fix on this one. Like we see it. So he would be a good young veteran.
There you go.
So yeah, I mean, I think, and especially like if you're going to bring in a pitcher that you need to like work with a little bit, the earlier the better. Right. Yeah. The earlier that you can get him in, the better. Don't wait for a month and then lose 30 days of development with him. Get him in now and then pay a little extra if you have to. And, that might even go into with like keeping some of these guys down at the minors. Like once you make that trade, maybe you don't have to keep them down there as much. You can bump them up because you've kind of made that trade then. But it'll be interesting to see. I'm kind of curious about the Levine thing, and I'm excited to see Imanaga back. He was pretty good in Iowa in his go. Struck out like 8 and 4. So
saw that, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have him back. I think he's a good presence to have.
3 more against the Cardinals. Shota scheduled to come back Thursday for the finale of that series. Then the Cubs will hit the road this weekend for 3 in Houston before they come back next Tuesday and host the Guardians for 3 at Wrigley Field. He is Jason Ross. I am Mitch Woodmeyer. This is the Northside Baseball Podcast. We'll see you next week.